Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast. I'm so glad you've come to join us. This week, I was inspired to share a story that happened to me last week, all about dealing with expectations and potential resentment and listening to your body. So, when was the last time that you said yes to something? And when the time came to do it, every ounce of your being just said, I don't want it. What do you do? Well, I can tell you what happens when you override that inner voice, that same, I don't want to, when you push through. And I've been pretty professional at pushing through on a number of different situations because somehow fulfilling these self-imposed obligations felt virtuous, like that I could be free of judgment from others, judgment from myself, because I was being so helpful. But here's the thing: when we push through and we're driven from an energy of obligation versus being driven by an energy of what really aligns for us and what we actually want to do, resentment can come meandering up to the surface, or it can come in like a full Mack truck, one or the other. And either way, you feel it in your body. Your body is giving you information and it's saying, hey, hold up. Can we pause here and take a look at this? So these days, I really try to check in and I listen to see what's going on and what isn't aligned for me today, and just get curious and see what's this about. And it's often, as I mentioned, about judgment or self-judgment, feeling judged by others. My mom used to talk to me about would have, could have, should have, and she was really wise. And somewhere under that Alzheimer's, I know that that wise person is still there. She just doesn't come out very often. And I think I've learned that when I ignore my gut, when I ignore my intuition and I force myself to show up, it doesn't make me noble. It makes me resentful. And that feeling, unfortunately, then just doesn't reside in your body. I mean, unfortunately, it does reside in your body, but it also leaks out. And it will be in your body language, it will be in your voice, it'll be in your general vibe that you show up with. And it will be in your general vibe that you show up with. It's because the energy we carry is contagious. And we are 1000% responsible for our own energy. So I think we're doing the right thing by showing up, but ask yourself, what version of me is showing up? Because people don't deserve my crappy energy or a less than version of myself. And I read this quote recently, and I don't know who originally said it, but people don't want your sacrifice, they want your presence. And that really hits. It's just such a good one. So, have you been forcing yourself to do something you really don't want to do? Take a minute to examine that. It doesn't mean you're a bad person for not wanting to do something. What's going on? Just get curious. Is it something you've always done and you feel it's expected of you? Or is it you that expects you to do that? Just get curious. So last weekend, I experienced a complete shift in perspective. And I managed to change a situation that was potentially a source of resentment into a moment of connection and joy, in fact, with a few moments of synchronicity, which were really the icing on the cake. I'd spent the weekend before, it was a long weekend, at my son's sports tournament, and it was out of town, and it was a good 4-hour drive. But in traffic on the way home, it was more than 5 hours. And it was just a full on weekend. And I was, tuckered out. And the next morning, I was supposed to go out and visit my parents. And my parents live in a care home. And it's not easy. It's a nice place, but it's never an easy visit. And for anyone dealing with parents and friends or family that are in care, my heart really goes out to you because it's hard. It's not what we would choose for ourselves necessarily. And it's certainly not the way we would like to remember our loved ones. And it often feels like not a choice that they would be choosing for themselves either. And so all of that just makes it hard. So that Monday, I was going to go and I was delaying, and I got a bunch of things done for my son and I was exhausted. I just didn't want to go. And it was a 45-minute drive to see them. It would have been at least 60 minutes plus in traffic. And I didn't have the right frame of mind to be visiting them. And I felt that resentment creeping in. And I thought, you know what? My parents don't deserve this. They don't deserve me showing up with lame-o vibes and not being my best self. So I canceled. My dad still called me 3 or 4 times to ask where I was and when I was coming out. That's just because he's got memory issues. And upon making the decision, I immediately felt lighter. I made myself a ridiculously luxurious iced coffee. I went upstairs to my computer, started writing out one of my stories from the farm. And this one was a mostly true story about a hummingbird, my mom and I. And it just felt good. It just felt good in my body. That weight of resentful energy just vanished. I knew I made the right decision. And I also got to catch up on a few life admin things and send the care home a note, just getting an update on when my dad could go on some bus trips. And the next morning I got up, I felt good. I headed out, the traffic was good, got to my mom and dad's, and we went and sat in their courtyard, had a nice visit. And I read my mom and dad the story I wrote based on the farm where I grew up, where they lived for the last 50 years. And I knew that both of them loved that story. Even my mom with Alzheimer's, and it's quite far advanced, I knew she knew what was going on in that story. And it was funny because when I started to read it, I had to change the order of a few things because I felt myself getting all emotional. So I saved the dedication part to the end. And at the end of the story, I told my mom what I wrote. And I said, "For Mom, thank you for encouraging me to follow my heart and the magic, and for introducing me to the fairies." Well, she looked up at me and she was all there. She was present. Her eyes got a little teary and she said, "Oh, that's so nice." And then something else. And it was the exact reaction that my mom would have had from 10 years ago. It was so beautiful. And I was so glad that I had listened to my feelings and my body the previous day and waited because of just that magical moment of lucidity of my mom's. Then it was time to wrap up the visit, and I brought my parents both back inside and we were waiting for the elevator. And in a sheer coincidence, I saw the activities coordinator. And I said to him, "If you ever have a cancellation," and I pointed at my dad, and it was behind his back, so he couldn't see. And he said, "Well, as a matter of fact, we have a cancellation right now." So my dad got to go on a bus trip that was leaving in 15 minutes to his favorite fish and chip restaurant with some of the other people from the home who were pretty together. And my dad has dementia, but he can hold it together pretty well. So he can do a lot of these activities. He just can't do them on his own. And he enjoys being with people. He enjoys going out for food and having a beer. And it was also a break from my mom, and he could talk to people. So then I got my mom all settled. I drove back into town. There was no traffic. I felt great. I knew that it was the right decision. And when you're listening to your gut and you are doing things that feel aligned for you, these moments of synchronicity, these beautiful gift moments, just pop up. And I guarantee you, when you start to notice them, you will start noticing more of them. I was so glad that I'd listened to my energy and that I hadn't showed up all cranky, because my parents deserve so much more than that. And not only was it logistically the right decision, but it was emotionally 100% the right decision. And it taught me, or it reminded me, don't override what your body's feeling because of some sense of obligation. Really examine those feelings. Where's the obligation coming from? Is it from somewhere else? Is it from you? Can you change it? What can you do? And think about, when was the last times you pushed through in those moments, and what happened? How did you feel? I love Nicole LePera, the holistic psychologist. And some of the stuff that she talks about is that when we override our needs to meet someone else's expectations, when we say yes, when our bodies are screaming no, that we're actually abandoning ourselves. And she talks about resentment as a teacher, and that self-abandoning, abandoning our core needs and authentic self in order to gain validation or love or whatever it is, always leads to this resentment. And if we're not conscious, we'll blame and project that resentment onto others, which leads us feeling more resentful and more shameful because we've outsourced our needs to somebody else. And she talks about how to heal from this resentment of being conscious around our boundaries and gaining an awareness about our own needs and limitations. And so she talks further about speaking of these limitations and honoring them can be uncomfortable and maybe even painful, because underneath that resentment is fear of abandonment and fear of losing people that we love if we honor how we truly feel and how it's going to be perceived. But in letting go of that, in releasing our desire to manage other people's perceptions of us, there's a really great freedom in that. And finally, a great quote from her is, putting everyone else's needs before your own isn't selfless, it's self-abandonment. And so, in wrapping up, here's some of the top takeaways. Resentment is a teacher. It's not just a feeling. It shows up to remind us where we're abandoning ourselves. And if we can get curious, can lead us back to better boundaries, better alignment with our true self. Our energy has an impact. The version of us that we show up with matters. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. Honoring your intuition and your gut isn't selfish. It allows you to be in alignment with your capacity in the moment and create space for connections and potentially these magical synchronicities. You don't need to earn rest. Rest isn't a reward for exhaustion. It's a prereq for your clearest, most creative and joyful life. And having boundaries and respecting your own energy and yourself is a way that we can be way more connected to others from our true selves and from our most authentic self. I hope you enjoyed the podcast and the stories, and as always, take what resonates with you, leave the rest. And most importantly, trust that version of you that knows what feels right for you. The one that's not pushing, but the one that's tuning in and getting curious. So thanks again for listening. Have a fabulous week. See you next week.